Hey, we want to go ahead and say thank you so much for taking the time to check out our YouTube video. If you've not done so already, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel, We Like Comic Books. And if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit the like button as well. Okay, on with the story. Hey, I want to thank you all for either tuning back into our channel or for joining us here for the first time. Just a general thank you all for viewing. So right now, we're right in the middle of the Dark God story arc. And at this point in the story, we're up to part number 3. And that puts us right into Wonder Woman Annual number 2. Now there's a whole lot to unravel in this issue, so we're just going to go ahead and dive right into it. So if you remember at the end of issue number 47, Wonder Woman and her brother Jason were face to face with the Dark Gods. The Dark Gods had just come to Earth. Wonder Woman and her brother Jason are really trying to figure out what exactly they're going to do. Well, while they're doing some investigating, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Wonder Woman is taken away by 2 members of the Star Sapphires Corps. And we find out an issue in the Wonder Woman Annual that they in fact take them to their home world. So if you're not familiar with who or what a Star Sapphire is, we're hoping that this next area will help out. So there are different types of lantern cores throughout the galaxy, and as we just alluded to, the Star Sapphires happen to be one of those cores. So each of these cores has been able to master an aspect of the emotional spectrum. And if you're not familiar with what this concept is, think of the emotional spectrum as a power source. And if you have or a power or energy source, and if you've got the right technology, you can actually tap into it. And all lantern technology is based off of technology derived from an old and ancient race of beings in the DC universe that are known as the Malthusians. And you actually have a sect of Malthusians that went on to become known as the Guardians of the Universe. Now, these individuals wanted to make sure that there was order throughout the solar system, so they created their own set of space police essentially, and that's actually where the Green Lantern Corps derived from. So as I just mentioned, having the right technology gives someone the ability to tap into the emotional spectrum. And with that technology, they're able to not only access the emotional spectrum, but harness it and wield it to do incredible things. And as you've seen, or as you may or may not know, and as you can see in some of these pictures, the lanterns use a lantern as their power source. That's how they recharge their ring. And as I just said, the ring is used to actually wield the emotional spectrum. So there are different colors of the emotional spectrum which are associated with a different emotion that has been mastered by said core. So for example, you've got the Green Lantern Corps. They're the color green. The emotion that's associated with that is willpower. So Green Lanterns are masters of will. Star Sapphires are masters of the emotion of love, and the color that's associated with their core is the color violet. So if you're unfamiliar with who the Star Sapphires were, we hope that that little explanation helped. The opening words to any story are always important, and in my mind, they nailed it with this issue, because the first words of this book are not only ominous, but it's accompanied with a picture that in my mind is even more ominous. So those opening words are, and I quote, "Love is dying on the world where love is everything," end quote. Now there's just something about those opening words that really hits me. I think it's a fun play on words, and it also just lets you know, like, dang, stuff is really bad here. And if you're not familiar with that big crumbling symbol, we're just going to kind of reply some ground that we just went through just to kind of foot stomp some things here. So that big crumbling symbol is a power battery, and each core uses an item like we spoke about before to channel the area of the emotional spectrum that core is tuned to, and that item is typically a ring. Now those rings have a finite supply of that core's emotional spectrum that they can use at any given time before it has to be recharged. So each lantern ultimately has to utilize the energy that's been gathered by the central battery associated with their core in order to recharge their ring or other instrument that they use to wield the emotional spectrum. So the fact that this power source is in peril is a huge deal. Number one, because these power sources are immensely powerful. They're literally harnessing, basically filtering that emotional spectrum energy source throughout the galaxy into that battery to be used by that core's respective lanterns. But number two, what's even more ominous or bleak for the Star Sapphires is that if this battery ceased to exist, the Star Sapphires won't exist either, because there won't be a way for them to recharge their rings. When Wonder Woman arrived to the homeworld of the Star Sapphires, she can look around and see that this planet has seen some better days. And the Star Sapphires are speaking with her and letting her know that they need her help. But Wonder Woman is basically telling them, like, hey, I know you've got some things going on here. I want to help. I mean, I can even come back to help. But there are some huge things going on the planet Earth that I need to attend to. I mean, there are these huge monoliths that have appeared in the sky, and apparently I'm at fault for their appearance. Now, that's not what the comic book says. That's just me kind of paraphrasing it and just summarizing it here for you. But at any rate, when the Star Sapphires hear this, well, they respond to what Wonder Woman says, and they basically say this. They're like, hey, if you're to blame for what's going on the planet Earth, specifically as it relates to these monoliths, well, hey, you may have a part in what's going on here as well, because a monolith has appeared over our skies as well, and it is in part responsible for what you see going on around you right now. So having realized that she's potentially to blame for more pain and suffering, Wonder Woman begins to get the skinny on what's happening. So the monolith that appeared in the sky above the Star Sapphire's home world belongs to a dark god from the dark multiverse by the name of Carnell. And he is a god of love, but we find out that love is twisted. The version of love that he is a god of is one that exemplifies a flawed love. And here's what the Star Sapphires have surmised and theorized about this sort of love. They believe that it's a representation of love in its cruelest and crudest form. And as a matter of fact, Carnell can detect a flaw in anyone's love. So just think about it. Any love that has just the smallest hint of envy, jealousy, pride, etc. baked into it, no matter how insignificant, is enough to taint that love. And when it comes to the Star Sapphires, we're talking about a tainting of the love that they're wielding via their ability to tap into the emotional spectrum. And what Wonder Woman also finds out is the Star Sapphires, of course, do mount an attack against Carnell, trying to drive him away. But when they make their attack, they let Wonder Woman know that Carnell, of course, he's not defenseless. He starts emitting these beams that hit the Star Sapphires, and when these beams hit them, it actually starts to show them the flaws or imperfections in their love. And when someone is hit with those beams, they start to burn. Now, I know that cannot feel good. And according to the Star Sapphires, they believe that it's a combination of Carnell, his twisted version of love, and the type of love that the Star Sapphires are supposed to represent is the thing that's actually what ends up destroying the Star Sapphires. And what isn't clear to me, and I just kind of have some of my own thoughts about it, is it's not clear to me if when the Star Sapphires are hit with these beams, they have their imperfections revealed to them, and of course the dichotomy between their love and Carnell's love. I wasn't sure if that ends up killing or destroying all the Star Sapphires that ended up attacking Carnell, or if it just ended up defeating some of them. As I was thinking about this a few times, it made me think that only some of them had to have gotten destroyed. And the reason that I think that is somebody had to come back and tell the Star Sapphires that when those beams hit them, that it revealed a flaw or some sort of imperfection in their love in order for Wonder Woman to know the effects of those beams. So at any rate, that's what I'm thinking. But I'll tell you this, when you look at these pictures, it is pretty clear that the damage that was done in that onslaught was pretty significant. I don't know what that means to the ranks of the Star Sapphires, but it looks to be, again, a pretty significant hit to their forces. And in addition to that, it's that combination that's also the combination of the dichotomy between Carnell's, the type of love he represents, and the Star Sapphire love that's also leading to a deterioration of the central battery of the Star Sapphires. So as Wonder Woman gets caught up to speed about what's been going on, she immediately goes up to confront Carnell, but not before temporarily rejoining the Star Sapphire Corps. So after flying up to the monolith, she's in fact greeted by the Dark God, and he quickly blasts her with one of his beams. And he's thinking that, you know what, this beam has made short work of the other Star Sapphires. I'm sure it will do the same thing to Wonder Woman. Again, that's me paraphrasing. But instead he becomes really surprised because the beam didn't burn her up like it did with the other Star Sapphires, and the two start battling. They continue battling back and forth, but then Carnell is able to hit Wonder Woman again with another one of these blasts, but this time it appears to have a different effect than the first one. This blast allows Carnell to see all the acts of love that Wonder Woman has had in her life. But in Carnell's words, he's not only able to see that love, but to see any love that has any hint of hate, jealousy, envy, something along those lines, anything that would kind of taint the purity of what we think love represents. And I guess it just amplifies that to Carnell, and maybe that brings some sort of pain to a Star Sapphire. I mean, I don't know, but we know earlier that really messes him up. But what's interesting is that with him having this connection with Wonder Woman, it's allowing him to see her inner thoughts. And at that moment, he realizes that even though Wonder Woman is hurt, even though she's reeling from this attack, in her mind, she's still desperately wanting to battle Carnell. I mean, she's not folding in the towel. So what he decides to do is oblige her and continue to do battle, but he makes the decision to move the battle to his mind, where he believes he has an advantage over her. And it's at this point that he starts to provide more details to Wonder Woman about his background, a little bit more about the Dark Gods, and what exactly Wonder Woman has unleashed upon the universe. Wonder Woman learns that Carnell was once a mortal boy. He had a loving mother and, unfortunately, a very cruel father, and that father went on to kill his mother. As a matter of fact, Carnell's father literally beat his wife, Carnell's mother, to death. So when Carnell learned about this, he ran away in fear because he didn't know what his father would do to him. So all the while, he had this immense love for his, recently departed mother, and at the same time, just a huge amount of anger towards his father. And that little boy, that little boy with this emotional trauma, it caught the eye of the leader of the Dark Gods, King Best. And King Best used his powers to actually transform the boy into the Dark God, Carnell. So I don't know if Carnell was his name as a mortal or not, but again, I think we all know that as a Dark God, his name is Carnell. Carnell reveals some other interesting facts about the Dark Gods. The first one is that there are 13 Dark Gods in total. The second thing is that only 5 of them came over to this universe. So I think it's really interesting because you don't know, are they going to appear in a later issue? Or might there be a story in the future that'll introduce these other Dark Gods? I don't know, but I think it'll be something that'll be neat to explore. So the Dark Gods loosely share some symmetry with the Greek god stories that we know about. So just like in Greek mythology, for example, you had a race of beings that were known as the Titans. And the Titans existed before the Greek gods in Greek mythology. Well, in the Dark Multiverse, you have Titans as well. And it's not certain if the Titans existed first or at the same time as the fledgling Dark God Pantheon, or preceded them and potentially created the Dark God Pantheon after that. We don't know. But what is clear is that these Titans were extremely powerful dudes, maybe even dudettes. Carnell lets Wonder Woman know that these Titans actually destroyed 5 realities in order to create the world that the Dark Gods eventually went to live on. And as the story goes, after the Titans created that world, King Best eventually found his way to it, and then the rest of the Dark God Pantheon followed suit and followed King Best. Carnell goes on to explain how Wonder Woman is in fact responsible for the Dark God's arrival. During the Dark Metal story, Wonder Woman, along with the rest of the Justice League, are able to come into possession of something called the 10th metal. Now, this metal was needed to defeat the Dark God Barbatos and the nightmare versions of Batman, whose ultimate goal was to plunge Earth into their reality, in the Dark Multiverse. What makes 10th metal so powerful and important is that we learn this metal is used in the creation of all worlds, period. It's also known as a metal known for being the metal of pure possibility. So in Dark Knight's metal, there's a part where the Justice League, using the power of the 10th metal, is able to connect with all beings of Earth, because we learned that all beings of Earth have traces of 10th metal in them. So by tapping into these traces of 10th metal in conjunction with the amount of 10th metal that the Justice League had, ended up being enough to lift the Earth out of the dark multiverse and back into its proper place in its current reality. In the aftermath of Dark Knight's metal, Batman tells the heroes that because of their use of the 10th metal, the heroes essentially rebuilt the universe, and through their use of the metal, he's saying that some of their deepest desires, even if they were unwittingly there, may have been acted upon through their use of 10th metals, and the heroes may not have even known about it. So he essentially hints at unintended consequences that may arise as a result of their use of the 10th metal, and the arrival of the Dark Gods happens to be one of those. So here we learn that when Wonder Woman has her connection with 10th metal, she asks for the return of the gods. Now we don't learn that in Dark Metal. What's really neat is that it's actually made aware to us here in this annual. But when she talks about wanting the return of the gods, she meant the Greek gods. But since it was not specific, it's almost like a cosmic loophole occurs and she gets the Dark Gods instead. And she barely remembers any of this happening, and this is a result of one of the Dark Gods she unknowingly summoned, and that is the God with no name. And we learn more about him in the next issue of Wonder Woman, which is Wonder Woman number 48. But he wanted her summoning of the Dark Gods to be obscured because he didn't want Wonder Woman to be aware of this and potentially prepare some sort of defense for their arrival. And this is a neat strategy that the Dark Gods have employed, because they know that Wonder Woman is responsible for calling them, but they also have no idea of how powerful she may be, so they have essentially launched a stealth operation into this universe. Carnell also lets Wonder Woman know that he's the one who's actually responsible for getting the Star Sapphires to bring Wonder Woman to their home world, because you see, Carnell was actually able to plant that thought into their heads, and I think that's just so impressive because we just learn more and more about the abilities of these Dark Gods. So I just think that's just one more piece of the puzzle, one more interesting thing about their power set. I can't wait to see what else they do in these future books. But at any rate, Carnell makes it known that King Best does not want Wonder Woman on Earth when they arrive. But what's impressive to me about all of this is that while Wonder Woman is battling Carnell in his mind, she's carefully piecing his story together, just looking for clues. And one of the first things she starts to think about and pull together is the fact that if the Dark Gods do not want her on Earth, could she potentially hold the key to sending them back? So she begins to kind of articulate this, but before she is able to fully get it out, it's almost like Carnell realizes that Wonder Woman may have discovered something that could lead to the defeat of the Dark Gods, and he makes moves to quickly finish her off. But fortunately, she gets saved by the Sapphires. So at this point, in the physical world, Wonder Woman is basically like knocked out, kind of like in either like a sleep or comatose, not quite sure. But the Star Sapphires were able to wake Wonder Woman up. And when Wonder Woman wakes up, based off of everything she's learned, she rallies the Star Sapphires, but decides to go ahead and retreat because she realizes that a direct attack against Carnell will not work. Wonder Woman now realizes what needs to be done to defeat Carnell. So she leads what appears to be the might of the remaining Star Sapphires towards Carnell. And the Star Sapphires fire from their rings, but instead of firing it at Carnell, they actually fire it at Wonder Woman's sword. As Wonder Woman approaches Carnell, you can see her easily deflecting one of his blasts, and then she begins to let him know that he basically made the classic mistake that all bad guys make, and that's talking too much. Because she basically tells him this, as she was reflecting on his origin, on his story. She thinks back to not Carnell of today, but the sad, scared little boy who was running away because his mother got killed and he was worried about what his father would do to him. And that story did not move Wonder Woman to hate, but pity and love for that little boy. A love with no hate, no envy, jealousy, or anything that could taint that love. We're talking about true, pure, untainted love. And it's that type of pure love magnified by the love of the other Star Sapphires, which was fired at her sword, which brought about an impressive weapon. And with that love, with that sword, she's able to do some incredible damage to Carnell, as you can see here. So much so that he actually retreats. But he lets her know when he sees her again, it's not only going to be on Earth, but it will be with the other dark gods. After Carnell is defeated and retreats back to Earth, Wonder Woman is able to wrap everything up there with the Star Sapphires. After the threat of Carnell had passed, she was able to basically hang up the ring, so to speak, and she relinquished her role, her temporary role, as a part of the Star Sapphire Corps. And the Star Sapphires then in turn were able to take her home so that she could deal with the dark gods there on Earth. So ladies and gentlemen, that is it for this issue. This was a long video, like we said, but I think it was worth it. As we said at the beginning, there was a lot of ground to cover in this particular issue because it reveals some things to us about the dark gods that hadn't been revealed yet. So we hope that you enjoyed this video, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video where we dive into Wonder Woman number 48. I think that's going to be part 4 of the Dark God story arc. Alright folks, have a good one.